As far as epic backdrops go, North America today already has plenty. You've got the towering Rockies, the endless Great Plains, and some of the most recognizable cities in the world. But rewind the clock just 13,000 years, basically yesterday, in evolutionary terms, and this same land would have looked very different. Forget about bison grazing on prairies or bald eagles soaring overhead. Imagine instead walking outside your campsite and spotting a 12-foot-tall sloth casually chewing leaves, a bear the size of a small car sprinting faster than a horse, or a lion with saber teeth longer than your fingers gleaming in the sunlight. This wasn't a movie set. It wasn't Jurassic Park, it was real. And the very first people to ever set foot here, the Paleo-Indians, the so-called Clovis people, didn't just imagine these beasts. They lived alongside them. Now, picture this. You're a human hunter, crossing an icy land bridge from Siberia. You've got stone-tipped spears, animal skins, and fire. You expect maybe a deer or two. Instead, you find yourself in a world that feels less like North America and more like a mashup between Ice Age and a nightmare zoo. And the craziest part? All of this was happening at the exact same time as humans in the Middle East were just starting to experiment with farming. In other words, your ancestors in North America were still duking it out with megafauna, while others were figuring out how to grow wheat. So yeah, welcome to Ice Age America. It was wild. The story begins near the end of the last Ice Age, when massive ice sheets blanketed much of Canada and the northern United States. Sea levels were lower, revealing a bridge of land that connected Siberia to Alaska. This strip of Earth, known today as Beringia, was essentially the front door into a brand new world. And sometime around 15,000 years ago, give or take a millennium, humans walked through that door. These weren't weekend travelers. They were skilled hunter-gatherers chasing herds of game across frozen tundra. We call them the Clovis people, named after the distinctive spear points they left behind in New Mexico. And they were tough. Think about it. They crossed a land bridge in subarctic conditions, survived in landscapes filled with predators, and managed to spread across an entire continent in just a couple thousand years. Not bad for folks without Wi-Fi. But here's the thing. When they arrived, they weren't stepping into some untouched wilderness full of rabbits and deer. Nope. They were stepping into the land of giants. Take the Colombian mammoth. For instance, if you thought African elephants were impressive, these guys made them look modest. 10 tons of bulk, tusks curling up to 16 feet long. Shaggy coats for the cold mammoths were basically walking tanks. And mastodons, their close relatives, were hanging around too, slightly smaller, with straighter tusks. They looked similar enough to confuse anyone not holding a paleontology degree. Imagine meeting one in the forest. You'd probably just call it giant hairy elephant number 2 and hope it didn't trample you. And these were just the warm-up acts. Because wandering the same land were creatures that would make even Hollywood creature designers go, "That's too much. Tone it down." Like the short-faced bear, for example. Standing up, it could reach over 11 feet tall. On all fours, it still towered above any human. And here's the kicker, it wasn't some lumbering slowpoke. Fossil evidence suggests it could outrun a racehorse over short distances. So basically, the Clovis people were camping in a land where the bears were built like linebackers and could also sprint like NFL running backs. Nice. Meanwhile, giant ground sloths, Megatherium's North American cousins, were just chilling. These sloths were the size of small elephants, covered in thick fur, and armed with claws the length of kitchen knives. Despite their chill reputation, you probably wouldn't want to mess with them. One swipe and you'd be history. And then there was the Smilodon, the saber-toothed cat. The name sounds fancy, but these were no smiling kittens. With fangs up to 7 inches long, stocky bodies, and jaws strong enough to pierce through bone. They were apex predators that specialized in ambushing prey much bigger than humans. And unlike lions today that hunt in open savannas, Smilodons were ambush specialists, which basically means if you were a Clovis hunter walking through tall grass, you might not even realize you were on the menu until it was too late. So just to recap, the first humans in North America weren't greeted by friendly buffalo and bald eagles. They were greeted by mammoths, mastodons, saber-toothed cats, giant sloths, and the fastest, meanest bears ever to exist. In other words, the original Welcome to America package was basically, good luck. Try not to get eaten. So, picture this. You've just crossed into a brand new continent. You've got your Clovis spear in hand, a group of family members behind you, and you're expecting maybe some deer or bison. Instead, you step into what can only be described as the Pleistocene neighborhood from hell. Because here in North America, the neighbors were absolutely gigantic. The mammoth and mastodon, the walking tanks. First up, the celebrities of the Ice Age, the mammoths. Specifically, the Columbian mammoth, a beast so massive it could weigh 10 tons and stand as tall as a two-story house. Forget SUVs, this was the original off-road vehicle. Its tusks alone could stretch 16 feet, long enough to double as ski rails if you were desperate. And unlike their woolly cousins in Siberia, Columbian mammoths weren't buried under snow all year. They roamed grassy plains and open forests as far south as modern-day Mexico. In fact, they were probably the first megafauna the Clovis people saw and thought, dinner. Close behind were the mastodons. Now, mastodons often get confused with mammoths, but they were a whole different vibe. Shorter, stockier, and with straighter tusks. They looked like mammoths that had skipped leg day and spent more time in the forest. Their teeth were also different, designed for chewing twigs and branches, not grass. If mammoths were the lawnmowers of the Ice Age, mastodons were the hedge trimmers. And here's the kicker. Both mammoths and mastodons were hunted by humans. Archaeologists have found Clovis spear points embedded in their bones. Imagine the guts it took to go after a 10-ton animal with nothing but a sharpened rock. That's like trying to take down a bulldozer using a toothpick. The short-faced bear, the sprinting linebacker. Now, let's move on to something even scarier. The short-faced bear. If you think grizzlies today are intimidating, multiply that by 2. This guy could stand 11 feet tall when on its hind legs. Its head was broad, its jaws were massive, and its legs were freakishly long. Long enough, in fact, that scientists believe it could run faster than a horse. Yes, you heard that right. A bear, faster than a horse. Let that sink in. So not only could it outrun you, it could also probably catch up to your dinner, your campfire, and your bad decisions. And unlike today's omnivorous bears who munch on berries and salmon, the short-faced bear leaned heavily into meat. Its sheer size suggests it either hunted large animals or more likely bullied other predators off their kills. So if you were a Smilodon who just took down a bison, guess what? A bear twice your size might just walk in and say, "Thanks for the snack." Smilodon, the saber-toothed assassin. Speaking of predators, let's talk about the Smilodon fatalis, the saber-toothed cat. With fangs up to 7 inches long, Smilodon was basically nature's version of a switchblade. But those fangs weren't just for show. They were specialized weapons designed to pierce throats and bellies, delivering quick kills to animals much bigger than themselves. And don't be fooled by their cat family tree. Smilodons didn't look like lions or tigers. They were stockier, with thick necks and short legs. They weren't marathon runners, they were ambush predators. Think of them as the big cats who skipped cardio but hit the weight room every single day. Now, picture being a Paleo-Indian hunter sneaking through tall grass, looking for a mammoth. Suddenly, you feel a presence. You look around, nothing. And then, out of nowhere, a 600-pound cat with swords in its mouth leaps at you. Yeah, no thank you. The ground sloth, the gentle giant, with knives for claws. Next up, the giant ground sloth, also known as Megatherium's North American cousin. These were not the lazy tree-hanging animals we know today. No, these sloths were the size of elephants. They stood 12 feet tall when rearing on their hind legs, and their claws were the size of kitchen knives. Despite their terrifying appearance, they weren't predators. They lumbered around munching on plants, tearing down entire tree branches with ease. But don't mistake herbivore for harmless. If you ticked one off, those claws could slice you open like a watermelon. Basically, they were peaceful tanks, but still tanks. The birds of terror, predators from the sky. And if land predators weren't enough, the skies had their own nightmare fuel. Enter the Teratorn, a vulture-like bird with a wingspan up to 16 feet, nearly double that of today's bald eagle. That's right. The Clovis people looked up and saw birds so massive they could shadow an entire campsite. Some legends from native tribes even talk about the thunderbird, a giant bird said to snatch up deer or even children. And while we can't prove every story, fossils suggest these gigantic birds were real. If you've ever been dive-bombed by a Canadian goose, now imagine one the size of a small airplane. Good luck. So, this was the neighborhood. 10-ton mammoths mowing down grasslands, mastodons crunching forests, saber-toothed cats waiting in ambush, bears faster than horses, sloths the size of trucks, and birds that could blot out the sun. For the first humans in North America, every single day was a survival challenge. You weren't just hunting for dinner, you were trying to make sure you didn't become dinner. So now you're a Clovis hunter, standing on the plains of what's today Kansas. The wind cuts cold. Your spear tip is razor sharp, and your stomach is growling. Out there somewhere is dinner, but also, out there somewhere is something that could turn you into dinner. That was the constant paradox of Ice Age North America. On one hand, it was a land of opportunity. Giant animals meant giant meals. But on the other hand, it was a land of constant danger. Giant predators meant giant problems. Mammoths on the menu. For the Paleo Indians, mammoths and mastodons were basically Costco on 4 legs. One successful hunt could feed an entire clan for weeks. Bones could be turned into tools, tusks into art, hides into shelters. In fact, some archaeological sites show mammoth bones arranged as building structures. Think of them as the original log cabins, except made of elephant parts. But hunting one wasn't easy. Imagine sneaking up on a creature the size of a bus, surrounded by a herd, each with the potential to stomp you into prehistoric jam. It wasn't a job for one guy. It was coordinated group warfare. Hunters likely drove mammoths into traps, swamps, or ambushes, where dozens of spears rained down. And if everything went right, boom, you had yourself a prehistoric barbecue. If everything went wrong, well, let's just say you became the mammoth's barbecue, living with monsters. But not every encounter was about hunting. Sometimes it was about surviving. Picture setting up camp near a river, only to realize later that a short-faced bear has also decided this is his fishing spot. Now what? He's 500 pounds, can outrun your fastest runner, and has claws like steak knives. Your options: run, pointless; fight, suicidal; abandon camp and let him have it. Most likely, option 3, which makes you wonder, how many nights did the first Americans pack up their shelters because a bear or a saber-toothed cat just casually strolled in? And let's not forget the ground sloths. Yes, they were technically herbivores. But when you're face-to-face with a 12-foot-tall creature swinging claws bigger than machetes, does it really matter that it eats leaves? Probably not. Best to give them plenty of space. Predators versus people. Now, here's where things get interesting. Humans weren't just afraid of these animals. Sometimes, the animals were afraid of us. Think about it. Predators like Smilodon were perfectly evolved to ambush deer, bison, and sloths. But when humans showed up, suddenly there was a new kind of prey. Prey that carried weapons, coordinated in groups, and fought back. Did saber-toothed cats ever attack humans? Probably. Fossilized bones show signs of claw marks that match predators. And oral traditions from later native peoples talk about giant cats with knives in their mouths stalking camps. But over time, predators may have learned that humans weren't worth the risk. After all, if your dinner keeps stabbing you with stone-tipped spears, maybe go back to hunting bison. Still, the psychological weight must have been huge. Every hunt was a gamble. Every journey was a risk. Humans weren't apex predators, yet they were just ambitious primates trying to carve out a niche in a world already full of killers. The birth of legends. And from this uneasy coexistence came stories. Across North America, indigenous peoples carried down myths and legends about monstrous animals. The thunderbird, said to darken the sky with its wings. The underwater panther, a predator lurking in rivers and lakes. Tales of giant bears, cats, and birds all echo what science now confirms. The first Americans really did live alongside monsters. And the legends weren't exaggerations. Imagine seeing a teratorn, basically a vulture with the wingspan of a small, plane circle overhead. Wouldn't you think the sky itself was alive? Imagine hearing the roar of a short-faced bear echo through a valley. Wouldn't you tell your children stories about a demon beast that ruled the mountains? These stories weren't just entertainment. They were survival guides, cultural memory, and maybe even a way to make sense of a world that seemed designed to kill you. So, life in Ice Age America wasn't just about hunting or being hunted. It was about constantly negotiating with giants, sometimes fighting them, sometimes avoiding them, sometimes worshiping them in story. And yet, despite all this danger, humans thrived. They spread across the continent in just a few thousand years, from the frozen north to the deserts of Mexico. Which brings us to a very big question. If humans and megafauna managed to coexist for centuries, why aren't these giants still here? So here's the million-dollar question. If mammoths, saber-toothed cats, giant sloths, and sprinting bears once roamed every corner of North America, then where are they now? Why don't we still have mammoths grazing the plains of Texas or saber-toothed cats prowling the forests of California? The short answer? They're gone. Completely. Wiped out in one of the most dramatic extinction events since the age of the dinosaurs. And the even bigger twist? It all happened in what amounts to the blink of an eye. The end of the Ice Age. Let's rewind about 12,000 years ago. The massive glaciers of the last Ice Age were melting. Temperatures were rising. Sea levels were climbing. And ecosystems were changing fast. Grasslands turned to forests. Rivers flooded. And food sources shifted. For animals like mammoths, who thrived on open grassy plains, this was bad news. Their buffet of grasslands started shrinking. The same went for other specialist creatures built for Ice Age conditions suddenly found themselves in a world that didn't fit them anymore. But here's the thing. Animals had survived climate change before. Mammoths had seen ice ages come and go for hundreds of thousands of years. Why was this one so different? Enter us. The real plot twist was that this time, humans were in the picture. And humans didn't just adapt to change, they made change. The Clovis people were expert hunters. Their stone-tipped spears were razor-sharp. Their strategies coordinated. And their appetites enormous. And they didn't just hunt deer or rabbits. Nope. They went after the big guys, mammoths, mastodons, even bison 10 times bigger than the ones today. Archaeologists have found kill sites littered with bones and spear points. Clear evidence that humans didn't just scavenge. They actively hunted megafauna. Imagine 20 or 30 hunters driving a mammoth into a swamp, pinning it down with spears until the beast collapsed. It was dangerous, but the payoff was worth it. One kill could feed dozens of people. But here's the catch. When you're taking out creatures that only reproduce every 10 or 15 years, it doesn't take much to cause a population crash. Humans didn't need to hunt all the mammoths, they just needed to hunt enough of them faster than they could replace themselves. The domino effect. And once the mammoths and mastodons started disappearing, everything else began to topple like dominoes. The saber-toothed cats? Gone. Without giant herbivores to prey on. They starved. The short-faced bear? Gone. Without carcasses to steal from. It lost its main food source. The giant ground sloths? Gone. Their forests were shrinking. And humans didn't exactly leave them alone either. The teratorns and other massive birds? Gone. No more megafauna to scavenge. No more niche to fill. Within just a couple of thousand years of blink in geological time, about 70% of North America's large mammals vanished. And we're not talking about obscure creatures nobody cared about. We're talking mammoths, mastodons, saber-toothed cats, camels, horses, sloths, giant beavers the size of black bears, armadillos the size of Volkswagens. A whole cast of Ice Age giants. Gone forever. The double punch. So, which was it, climate change or human hunting? The answer most scientists agree on today, both. The climate was already stressing populations. shrinking habitats and food supplies. Then humans showed up, adding direct hunting pressure on top of that. It was like a boxer already staggering on his feet. And then someone lands the knockout punch. And just like that, the megafauna that had ruled North America for millions of years were gone. The aftermath. And what did that leave behind? A continent suddenly emptier, quieter. The mammoths no longer thundered across the plains. The saber-toothed cats no longer crouched in the grass. The skies were no longer shadowed by giant birds. Instead, the survivors were the smaller, quicker breeders: deer, bison, elk, wolves, coyotes, animals that could adapt fast and reproduce often. Basically, the understudy stepped up when the main cast went extinct. For humans, this was both a triumph and a tragedy. On one hand, they had cleared the stage of competition. No more bears the size of cars chasing them down. On the other hand, the loss of megafauna meant the end of easy giant meals and the beginning of a harder, leaner lifestyle. So, the giants of North America didn't vanish because of one simple cause. They vanished because the world changed, and humans were there to accelerate the process. And once they were gone for good. But here's the fascinating part. Even though the animals disappeared, their memory didn't. They lived on in myths, in fossils, in stories whispered around fires. Which brings us to the final chapter of this tale, the legacy of these lost giants, and how echoes of them still shape North America today. The mammoths may be gone. The saber-toothed cats, just bones in museums. And the short-faced bear, nothing more than a terrifying illustration in a paleontology textbook, but their shadows are still with us. The giants of North America left behind more than fossils. They left behind stories, mysteries, and even dreams of bringing them back. Whispers in the myths. Long after the megafauna vanished, the first peoples of North America kept talking about them. Myths passed down for generations describe monstrous animals that sound suspiciously like Ice Age survivors. The thunderbird, a bird so massive it could block out the sun, bears more than a passing resemblance to teratorns. The underwater panther, feared in Great Lakes tribes, may have been inspired by sightings of giant beavers or ancient crocodilians. And stories of great hairy beasts roaming forests echo the memory of mammoths and mastodons. These weren't just bedtime stories. They were cultural, memorial history stretching back thousands of years, keeping the ghosts of giants alive long after their bones had crumbled. The fossil hunters. Fast forward to European settlers arriving in the New World. Imagine stumbling upon an enormous tusk sticking out of a riverbank in Ohio, or a massive bone in Kentucky that clearly didn't belong to any animal you'd ever seen. At first, settlers thought they had found proof of biblical monsters, maybe even remains from Noah's flood. Thomas Jefferson himself was obsessed with giant bones, speculating about mammoths still roaming the unexplored Western territories. In a way, the idea of America as a land of giants even helped fuel exploration. Museums filled up with these relics. Massive skulls, curved tusks, jawbones with dagger-like teeth, all physical proof that the continent had once been home to creatures that made lions and elephants look like house pets. Science. And the resurrection question. Today, we know the science. We've got radiocarbon dating, DNA sequencing, and even entire frozen mammoths pulled from Siberian ice. And every new discovery seems to whisper the same question. Could we bring them back? It's not just science fiction anymore. There are serious projects attempting to revive the woolly mammoth using recovered DNA and elephant surrogates. The idea is that one day, shaggy giants might once again roam the tundra. Whether that's ecological restoration or a real-life Jurassic Park experiment gone wrong is still up for debate. But the fact that people even want to bring them back says something. We're still fascinated, still haunted by the giants we erased. Lessons from the lost giants. In the end, the story of North America's giants isn't just about mammoths and saber-toothed cats. It's about us. About how humans stepped into a world full of monsters, adapted, and thrived, but also how we may have tipped the balance too far. It's a reminder that ecosystems are fragile, that giants can fall, and that the choices we make echo across millennia. Because if a few thousand hunters with stone spears could wipe out entire species, imagine what 8 billion of us with bulldozers and factories can do. Yet, there's hope in the fact that we still tell their stories. We still dig up their bones, marvel at their size, and dream about them walking the earth again. In a strange way, they're not entirely gone. They're still here, in our imagination, in our myths, and in the DNA frozen under ancient ice. Closing note. So next time you see a bison grazing in Yellowstone or a moose crossing a road in Canada, just remember, this continent once had neighbors 10 times bigger, faster, and scarier. And while they may have disappeared thousands of years ago, their legacy is carved into the land itself. North America wasn't always the land of bald eagles and buffalo. Once, it was the land of mammoths, saber-toothed assassins, sprinting bears, and thunderbirds. A land where humans weren't kings, yet just clever survivors trying to live in a world of giants. And that, perhaps, is the greatest legacy of all, a reminder that we share this planet not just with the living, but with the memory of everything that came before. So there you have it, the lost giants of North America. From mammoths and mastodons to saber-toothed cats and sprinting bears. This continent was once home to some of the wildest creatures evolution ever dreamed up. And for a brief, incredible moment in time, humans lived right alongside them. It's a story equal parts awe-inspiring and tragic. A reminder of how quickly even the mightiest animals can disappear, and how much power humans hold, for better or worse. But here's the thing, their bones might be buried, but their stories aren't. And if you want more adventures into the strange, the extinct, and the downright unbelievable, make sure you smash that subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss the next episode. Now, I've got a question for you. Backhand index pointing right, if you could bring back one Ice Age animal to see in real life, which would it be and why? Would you want to walk beside a mammoth on the prairie? Or watch a saber-toothed cat hunt? Or maybe see a giant ground sloth just casually ripping down a tree? Drop your answer in the comments. I can't wait to see what you pick. Until next time, thanks for watching. And remember, this land wasn't always ours alone. We once shared it with giants.